All right, we're going to be finishing this series on ecology with ecological succession. And what you need to remember is that an ecosystem is constantly changing. It's almost it's like a living entity. So all the animals that are in there, all the non-living things that are in there, the plants, all of these things are changing in response to natural disturbances like a tornado or an earthquake, but also to human disturbances. As humans go in, clear an area for a housing development or so on, it displaces the plants and the animals that lived in that area. So ecosystems are always changing, or we could say they're always evolving. And ecological succession is just the idea that says there's a series of changes that we can expect to occur in a community over time. If an area is left alone to rebuild from some type of a disaster, scientists know what things will start to happen first and second and so on over the years of trying to rebuild. One of the first things that's going to happen is that a pioneer species is going to have to come in to populate the area. Now you see pioneer species especially in primary succession, and we'll talk about primary succession and how the type of pioneer species that they have. But a pioneer species, one of the biggest examples would be lichens. It's not lichens, it's pronounced as a K, so lichens, and these will grow in many areas, but if you have a volcanic eruption, the lava will eventually harden into what's almost like a rock. It's very, very hard, and so that needs to be broken down because right now there's no soil for anything to grow. This volcanic rock is solid now. So the lichens will come in and they start to break down the rock and turn it into soil so that it is usable again for plants and shrubs and trees to come in and regrow. Lichens almost look mossy like. So the examples here that they are growing on rocks, so they are actually breaking this rock down, but it looks like moss almost. It does come in different colors. This is orange. This one on this picture is green. But those are examples of lichens. And then after a pioneer species has moved in and has developed some dirt, we have to have some soil. Then we can have some of our smaller plants come in. Moss, grasses, ferns, shrubs. They take root in very thin soil. The root systems don't go deep, and we don't have a lot of soil yet, so it makes sense that they would come next. And then they will also start to create soil just from being there. And then once we have enough soil, then you can have your larger root system. Plants come in like trees. You might start with the smaller, softer woods like pines, and then eventually get into the hardwood trees like oaks and maples and so on. So this is what succession looks like from an ecological perspective. This would be what we're going to call primary succession. Notice it's exposed rock at the beginning, and then you have that mossy, the lichens that cover it up. You get your small trees and shrubs. You're starting to get all that ground cover again, and then you get some pine trees, some maybe some spruce trees. These are trees that have not as big of a root system. They're not as deep as your harder wood trees. Those would come last. So that is succession from a picture view. And primary succession is the one we're going to mention first. This is where you have no soil existing. So it could be from a volcanic eruption, and that sometimes has built new islands. We have all this rock cover, so we kind of have to start from scratch with making soil and everything. It could be when glaciers melt, they leave exposed rock that doesn't have anything growing on it yet because it just was recently exposed. So that could be. And then also humans do this as well. Like right now, this was a big paved area. There was no soil. I mean, the soil was underneath the cement. Well, now you have the grasses that are starting to form, and that's because you've had lichens come in and have started to break the cement down, and so that there's enough of some soil forming to have grass come in at least. The whole goal is to reach this climax community. So notice you have some ground cover here with some ferns, but you also have the nice, some of those trees might be 100 years old. Okay, you want a very stable, mature community And when that happens, when you've reached that, what's called a climax community, then you are very stable. There's going to be little to no succession happening at this point. It's kind of reached the pinnacle. It's at its best. So unless another natural disaster or something comes in and hurts this climax community, this is pretty much as good as it gets. So this one has the least amount of change. It's also has taken the most time to develop, because this is, again, at the end of the journey. Secondary succession is the same sequence of events, only instead of starting with bare rock, you're usually from some type of natural disaster, maybe like an earthquake or a flood or a human disturbance of some type. The biggest difference is the soil. The soil is already present in secondary succession, so the pioneer species of the lichens coming in to break rock down, we don't really need that. There's soil already there. For instance, a forest fire, all those trees, the animals, everything's been displaced, it's moved, it's burnt to the ground, but the soil is still there. So things can rapidly move back in much faster than having to break rock down and starting from scratch. So secondary succession would look like this. Notice you have the fire. So you may have already been at a climax community. Fire destroys it, but your plants can come back in really quickly because you already have a really good base. You still have a pioneer species, but in this case it's probably not the lichens, since you don't have rock that needs to be broken down, but it would probably be the grass. Probably one of the first things to move back in after a fire, so that would be your pioneer species in that case. And that's the difference between primary and secondary. You need to know primary starts from bare rock, secondary already has soil in place.